Okay, welcome back to Kimbo's Crafts. I am Kimbo, and every week I post a video on Wednesdays regarding a craft, project, present, or in the past. So thank you for joining me for this one. Now, unfortunately, when I recorded this video, something went wrong with my microphone, so you'll see I'm talking with my hands in the video, but unfortunately the audio quality was just not usable, so I have to kind of go over it again. Now, so this project is a watercolor traveler tin, something I came up with after receiving these watercolors from Archer and Olive. I got a mystery box, which I have a video about that, which I will go ahead and link at the end of this one. So these were the watercolors I got from the mystery box, and they were a little damaged from the paper sticking to the top of them, although the quality of the watercolors is still okay. I tested it to make sure. And this is a tin, a mint tin, that I used and cleaned to remove all of the dust from it. So what I'm going to do is what I'm planning on doing here is removing the watercolor trays. So each individual color well does pop out very easily. And I'm lining the tin with a polymer clay, I believe is what it's called. So this one's Sculpey. It's a white pearl Sculpey, which I got from Michael's, again, my favorite store, not a sponsor. And what I do here, so something about Sculpey that makes it really ideal is that it's very user-friendly. It doesn't spread or make too much of a mess. You don't require water, so it's a very easy to use clay, really ideal for kind of classroom settings or for one-off projects kind of like this. And so I got 2 packages for if you're tracking that, they're about $2.99 at Michael's in my area, so very affordable project here as far as this Sculpey and the tin, at least. Of course, the watercolors, you could use any watercolor trays that you were able to pop out individually, or you could also create wells in the Sculpey, let it harden, and go back and fill it with whatever paints you want. So this is just my iteration of this. So with the Sculpey, you want to break off a piece and massage it in your hands, kind of warm it up with your hands and give it some work. And what I'm doing is kind of making it pliable and then smushing a bottom layer into the tin here. Now the bottom layer will help give it everything something to stick to, give it a base, and also raise things up from the bottom of the tin. In hindsight, since I'm recording this audio after the project, I am thinking that maybe that step wasn't necessary and it would have been easier to have the watercolors all leveled out if I had just not put down that bottom layer, because the Sculpey that I put around each of the color wells is enough to hold them stable and stuck in the tin. And if I'd been able to sort of sink them just flat into the bottom, it would have been a little bit easier to make sure that they were all one level. So here I am popping out, as you can see how easy they are to just come right out of the paper backing that was provided in the packaging. So I'm taking them out and I'm playing kind of with the layout possible in the tin. There is 6 per box. I got 2 of them, so that's 12 to work with. As you can see here, I should have done the math ahead of time, we'll just say. So I'm working on laying them in there. In a minute, you'll see I do take them out and turn them sideways, which is the layout I end up working with, which is 4 across and 3 down. That's pretty much the only way they would fit in there. So something to keep in mind is that so when you put in the clay, there's 2 options. I could have filled the whole thing, which would have taken a lot of time actually to massage and smush all that Sculpey in, and then you would have to sort of dig out where you place them. Instead, I end up going with making these kind of ribbons, which you'll see me create. Here I'm taking notes on where I'm going to be putting each of the color wells because they all have individual names, and I was thinking I would put them on a card inside the lid. So that's what I choose to do is to write down the names of them, orientation on a note card as I place them, so that way I can keep track for later, because once they're sunken in the clay, there's no reading the sides of the colors. And there's 3 of them that are so very dark, they look like the same, but they're actually grape. So that would be a purple, blue azurite, which is obviously going to be a blue, dark blue, and then twig, which I think is probably a dark brown black. So that's what the top row ends up being. So here I am starting the kind of special tray layout. I start by squishing the clay into the edges. This helps bring it out. So there is a lip, a curled lip to the aluminum of the tin. So I put it just about as deep as it goes into that till it levels out with that lip. That way I can start with the base of that. And of course you got to measure, you don't have to measure, you have to massage this clay. So that takes quite a bit of time. I think that's what I'm doing off camera here. So one thing I was thinking about when coming up with the plan for this, the trays that come with the watercolor, I originally got the Archer and Olive watercolors because I wanted to experiment with watercolor in my travel journals or just in my travels in general. So I got watercolor traveler notebook refills so I could put them in my traveler notebook. And then I got these, and they came in these very thin cardboard boxes, and like I mentioned, they have a little bit of damage because I'm not sure if in the packaging process maybe the colors were too moist still when they put the lids on them, but they came out that way, and so because of that the lids are a little damaged, and I just wasn't too impressed with the possible long-term use of the cardboard packages. There's no secure lid closure mechanism to keep the top cap on top of the box, and so in general I just thought this wasn't the most user-friendly option, so that's where it got my gears going for making this kind of tin. And then I found this really cute cotton candy flavored mint tin here with the hot pink. Which, speaking of the hot pink, the Sculpey that I purchased, which I said was in pearl white, there's so many different color options. In fact, there was hot pink. I thought about getting the hot pink so it would be a little bit same color story as the tin, but I thought it would kind of interfere with how the different watercolor wells appeared, so I didn't go with that option in the end. I went with the pearly to make it a little fun, but wanted to keep it white so I could see those different colors. And here I'm constructing the wells, so I'm just making a little kind of grid with thin strips of the Sculpey so that I can sink the color wells into them without having to dig out any of the Sculpey. That's the best option I could think of. From this view though, it looks like maybe I should have laid out a little bit better how to do it, but it turned out okay considering. Yep, so here I am putting it in. You don't have to make it perfect. You'll see it does work out just fine. Putting it in there really rough because this is going to be the squishy bits that go between the wells, and I was able to manipulate them around as I put them in, which you'll see here in a minute. First I need to stop though, figure out the layout of the colors, how I want them, and list them out on my note page there. This is where I go through them. Yep, there's those dark colors. So something to keep in mind, this tin is going to be very, I think, rugged. It'll be able to last a long time. Once the Sculpey is dry, it's going to be very difficult for me to remove them, but hopefully these watercolors last me a long time. And that's just a problem I'm going to have to handle in the future. Something to keep in mind with these projects with this clay, also, a lot of clay has to be fired to make it truly harden. This will harden over time. It takes a while because of how deep I make it and also how much is exposed to the air, but it will air dry eventually. And it will have some shrinkage because of that, so that's something to keep in mind. Even if it doesn't fully dry though, as long as it's not making the watercolors moist, I think it'll be okay. We'll see long term, but so far, now that I can speak from the end of the project, it doesn't interrupt the colors at all. So here I am manipulating it. It's the first row I made very roomy, so I was able to put them in and then squish the separating section under it up. There you go. The next one became a little bit more congested, but I was able to keep a little bit of separation. You'll see as I go in, it gets a little harder to keep them with a good amount of separating Sculpey. Yep, so you just sink them in there. And then once they're all in, you'll see I pick it up and I kind of have to manipulate and squish down some of the squares because they're not all even. Here I am squishing them down. This is the part that I mentioned. Maybe the Sculpey on the bottom was not necessary whatsoever. Would have been a little bit easier to get it even. And as you can see by turning it over, they are sunk in, they're tight in that container, they're not going to fall out. It doesn't matter how much I shake it around, actually. I tested it quite a few times. And they're all very even in there. Here I am pressing it down to get an even top. Yeah, it's quite heavy actually when it's over, but there you go. There is some gap between the different colors, which I mentioned in this video, and I take care of towards the end when I'm finishing it up. Okay, I have a quick one last update really of how I finished up this tray. Now, one thing I did was I used what's called a cuticle pusher. So I did go back, I made very small rolls of the Sculpey, and I put it in between. That way I would get kind of more of a separation between the colors, so when I go to paint, there'd be less kind of room for them to merge. So it kind of helps make a demarcation line between them. Anyway, so with that, I went back with a cuticle pusher and I pushed the Sculpey back after putting them. So it's very full of Sculpey, I guess is the best way I'm putting it. So I filled them, pushed them back, so I got my wells. And then I made this card with the list of the different colors. Now all I simply did was take a cardstock piece of paper. I laid it down and then I just traced around. And then once I cut it out, I just cut within between the line, or just inside of the line, so that I would make sure that it wasn't too tight. And then I slipped right in. I had these cute stickers laying around left over from my Leafy On project. So if you saw that, that's what these are from. And I thought that would be a fun little addition. So I stuck those in. Turns out you can't write or see very well writing on top of it. So I had to put down some correction tape down so I could be able to write on top of it and see. So those are my colors. I think I'm actually probably going to make a watercolor card, well, from watercolor paper, do the same thing where I trace it, cut it out, and then I'll do little paint swatches for them instead, because I don't know if I really need to know the color names so much as what they look like in use. So that's probably an update that I'll do to this later now that I've thought about it. So yeah, this is the finished project. Let me know what you think. Have you ever thought about doing this or done something similar? And yeah, thank you for joining me. See you next week.